Good evening, everybody. And I think we are all trying to make the most of our lockdown, due to this unfortunate event. But let's look at the positive side. We can always, increase our academics and, become more knowledgeable. So I'm thankful to Novartis and to all my friends who have joined for this talk on managing neovascular age-related macular degeneration. How should we find the optimal treatment strategies, and based on what is the current evidence? So we know that age-related macular degeneration contributes to more than 50% of the causes of blindness in developed countries. It is 90% dry AMD, but it is the 10% neovascular AMD which really creates a lot of trouble and leads to a lot of patient visits and leads to a lot of treatment effort by retina specialists. So AMD, since is the leading cause of severe and irreversible vision loss worldwide, and it is the #1 cause of blindness in the developed countries, and also picking up in the developing countries now with more and more better and better healthcare facilities and more specialists to help these people. It is increasing in prevalence to 8.7% now as a consequence of more and more aging population, and estimated around 196 million blind people by 2020. And as we see that as your age increases from 60 to more than 80, you develop more and more severe forms of AMD and consequently vision loss, starting for around 5% or less than 5% in your 50s to around 35% in your 80s. We all know neovascular AMD is a complex disease. It develops from confluence of drusen to forming fibrovascular proliferative pigment epithelial detachments. And we know that there is pathological growth of new blood vessels, can be under the RPE, can break from the RPE, get under the subretinal space where it leaks fluid, and these new vessels come in that space, which is the fluid leads to the subretinal fluid, and it even leads to hemorrhage and leads to this large area of pigment depigmentation which you see, and consequent loss of vision. So RPE detachment can occur in both wet and dry AMD. We know that research has focused a lot on providing effective treatment strategies. There was no treatment in the 1980s. Towards the 90s, we got the thermal laser, which again led to a lot of vision loss. Of course, it could stabilize the disease a little bit, but could lead to recurrent neovascularization. And in early 2000s, we had photodynamic therapy, which appeared very promising, but it only kind of slowed or made things slightly better. It was not until 2005, when the anti-VEGF agents came, that there was a transformation in the treatment of neovascular AMD, and we could see very good visual and anatomical outcomes. So the role of VEGF in progression of ARMD, as we all know, is that it is the upregulation of VEGF, which leads to increased amount of fluid leakage, a promotion of the growth of abnormal blood vessels or the neovascularization, and fluid leakage into the retina, which disrupts the anatomical architecture of the retina, resulting in vision loss. Hence, the role of anti-VEGF agents, which inhibit this VEGF and thus lead to absorption of this fluid, and of course, some amount of regression in the neovascularization as well. So the current scenario, it gives us a very broad range of treatment options of different costs, which can be given to the patient depending on his financial status. Nearly all of them are backed by randomized controlled trials, which is the first one is ranibizumab or Lucentis, backed by Anchor, Marina, CAT and IVAN trials. Bevacizumab or Avastin, again backed by solid evidence. Of course, less than ranibizumab, which has the maximum amount of evidence available today. Aflibercept or Eylea, which is also supported by the VIEW trials. And the latest kid on the block, brolucizumab or Bevo, which is supported by the Hawk and Harrier trials. Of course, it's not available in India as yet, but appears to be a very promising molecule. We know that after the advent of anti-VEGFs and use of anti-VEGFs, we have reduced blindness, legal blindness, by 50%. Another important thing which I want all of you to consider is, what is your treatment strategy for wet AMD? The PATCH survey of the American Society of Retina Specialists showed us that internationally, treat and extend is the most common type of regimen which retina specialists use However, in our country, and at least in my setup till now, we have been using more of PRN strategies. Of course, it has a lot to do with the the economic status of our patients and healthcare policies which they have. So there are lots of issues with that, but we'll see why treat and extend is the best. So evidence-based approaches to anti-VEGF dosing for the treatment of AMD are monthly. You can give the anti-VEGF monthly, supported by Marina and Anchor; bi-monthly, which was seen in the VIEW trials, which was supposed to be quite good, with aflibercept; quarterly in PYRE and EXCITE trials. A PRN regimen. PRN means pro-re nata. That means you treat when the disease is active, right? But it does require monthly monitoring. It is supported by Harbor and CAT. Treat and extend by Lucas trials. Wait and extend in the Solute trial. Observe and plan. These are the relatively newer treatment plans supported by Mentals and GANU trials. So what is the optimal, what is our aim? We should neither overtreat nor undertreat. If we overtreat, we'll have unnecessary patient visits, lot of extra injections, lot of burden on the patients, impact on your clinic as well, patients coming in every month, and potentially increased risk of even systemic adverse events. Under treatments, we have not very good vision outcomes. There is risk of irreversible vision loss and potential long-term complications of fluctuations in central retinal thickness. So what is the optimal treatment? First, we should assess visual function, the morphological parameters on OCT for the management of neovascular AMD. The treatment should be early, the treatment should be sufficient, and the treatment should be sustained. That is another sufficient and sustained I really want you to focus on. Of course, most of us try to treat early in the clinical setting. So the various treatment paradigms is the fixed monthly regimen. Of course, it leads to very good visual acuity results, but there's a lot of burden of visits, risks of treatment, and cost. The PRN, pro-re nata, of course, leads to much less number of injections, but the burden of visits is still there, because if you really go by a PRN treatment as the randomized control trials have used, it is based on monthly observation visits. So the patient has to still come monthly for observation. And in real world, as that does not happen, there are often poorer visual outcomes. Treat and extend somehow balances both. It decreases the burden of both injections and clinic visits for patients. And as we will see in the next slides, you will come to know about visual acuity as well. Personalized treatment strategies, whichever strategy you use, you have to monitor the patient for visual acuity, see the fundus, do OCT, do a photography, preferable. Of course, we do not do it every time. Autofluorescence is a great help in assessing RPE atrophy and thus fall in vision. You can do angiography, the conventional one, or OCT angiography, ICG if you have polyps, if you suspect polyps, and assessment of activity, loss of greater than 5 letters or 1/9, which is considered significant. And OCT, quantitative and qualitative assessments, persistent of any blood on follow-up, or leakage on angiography if we are doing one. This is just a broad this thing to make you understand. This is the TREX AMD study, which showed you that monthly treatments you have to treat every month. This is till 1 year. PRN with loading dose is you give the first 3 monthly loading doses, and then you treat when you feel the disease becomes active. But note here that you have to come for observation follow-up every month. So the pressure is still there for investigations and also for patient visits. PRN without loading dose, some people even treat with a single injection and then they see whether the disease is active. I don't think that's a good strategy to try. And the treat and extend, where you treat either with a 3 loading dose of injections, then you call the patient again, and then extend your treatment by 2 weeks if the macula is found to be dry, and then keep on following, and then decrease by 2 weeks if a disease recurs. We'll explain in a better way now. This is treat and extend. So you treat at day 0, then at 4 weeks, then at the next 4 weeks. Then the patient comes at 6 weeks. If at the 6 weeks, the macula is dry, now we are going to call him, there is no disease activity, call him at 8 weeks, where we'll still give him an injection. And if it is still dry on OCT at this time, we call him at 10 weeks. If it is still dry, we again extend the follow-up to maximum of 12 weeks, where we have to maintain at least for 3 to 4 visits before we think of discontinuing treatment. And Subsequently, another arm where we treat at 6 weeks, at 8 weeks, when we call the patient, there is some fluid. So there is some, observation that the disease is active, the vision is reduced. So at this point of time, we are going to treat, but we are going to decrease this treatment from interval from 10 weeks to 6 weeks. And if again at 6 weeks when we treat, we find that the disease is active, we reduce it to 4 weeks. So minimum is 4 weeks interval. And if this continues for 2 visits, we continue with 4 weekly injections. This is how treat and extend is done. We have proven efficacy with fixed dosing. That means if you give monthly injections, we all know by the Marina study, by the Anchor study and View study, that the visual acuity will be maintained and it will be nicely increased from occult CNVMs to around 7 letters and around 11 letters in classic CNVMs. And in the View one, which compared ranibizumab with aflibercept, you can see all over that the visual acuity of all these combinations, 0.5 milligram or 2 milligram aflibercept monthly or 2 monthly, it all remains the same. So we know that fixed regimens are great, no doubt. However, we come to the real world studies where there are randomized control trials and the real world studies which comprise observational studies or retrospective studies, and the real world where everything is not randomized, everything is not strict, and patients sometimes don't come for follow-up. There are lost follow-ups, lost treatment regimes, lots of things. So if we see the randomized control trials, whether it is fixed monthly or it is PRN or it is treat and extend, we are seeing that on an average 9 to 10 letters visual acuity gain is there in these studies. On an average around 9 letters, and on an average around 9 to 10 injections are given. If you compare all these, if you take an average in the randomized control trials. However, in the real world, the injection go down because mostly it is PRN which is followed. Even treat and extend is a little erratic. In these cases, that is where you see that the visual acuity improvement also falls to half. If you see 3.54 is the maximum visual acuity gain which you see here, and the number of injections also drop from around 9.5 to around 5. So lesser the number of injections, more irregular the follow-up, less is the visual acuity gain. And 9 to, I would say, 4 letters is 5 letter vision loss, which is the entire line of the ETDRS chart that we see. So that is how we understand what is the importance of good follow-up. So what does real world evidence show us? That if we give more than 5 injections, we can only maintain the baseline vision with which the patient presented. If we give more than 8, that is what is required to improve vision by at least 15 letters in the first year of treatment. And not only is the first year improvement count, you have to even keep a very good follow-up, and 0.66 letters of improvement visual acuity per ranibizumab injection. Another very good comparison of treat and extend protocol versus PRN. So one great thing which you will see is that in PRN, the visits, which if you go by a randomized control trial, has to be monthly. So you see here there are 12 visits. And if you see PRN, the visits are around 8. So it is 4 visits less strain on your clinic, 4 visits less strain on the patient, going, coming, fundus examination, visual acuity, OCT, all that time spent. And if you see the number of injections, there is hardly much difference. You see around 7 injections in the PRN regimen. And if you see treat and extend, it's 8. So it is only difference of 1 injection. And look at the number of follow-ups which you have reduced. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Another TREX study, which was by Wyckoff et al. It was a very well-designed study. And at 1 year, you could see in the TREX study that if you had a monthly regimen, the treat and extend regimen was rather superior, 10.5 letters improvement at 1 year compared to 9.2 in monthly. So although this was not statistically significant, and at 2 years, both were pretty similar. Another real world evidence of a meta-analysis which showed you, as we know already, that PRN leads to more number of in-clinic visits. I'm sorry. It leads to, PRN definitely leads to definitely less number of injections, difference of 2 here. This was for 1 year. But you see that with PRN, there is greatly reduced visual acuity gain. It is around 8.8 letters to 3.5 letters. Again, another line, a full line of ETDRS letters lost because of your treatment regimen. So treat and extend regimen allows doctors to have a flexible regimen, have the right treatment at the right time, and personalize the treatment based on disease activity. So it provides an opportunity for greater convenience, not only for the patient, but also for you, the right monitoring for each patient, and a personalized treatment approach, which you can always take. But the maximum, as all these studies have told us, the maximum extension should be 12 weeks, not more than that. We already know the advantages and disadvantages. This is another very interesting trial. Now we are comparing treat and extend versus monthly. So this was the trend trial, and this showed us that treat and extend was not inferior to monthly treatment. Of course, vision gain was slightly less, 6.2 letters compared to 8.1 in the monthly. But if you see the mean number of injections, it's around 2 injections less in the PR, in the treat and extend versus the monthly. And of course, in clinic visits are reduced, as we already know, comparing the other treatment regimens. Another astonishing thing which I found out was that a mean change in the central foveal thickness on OCT at month 12 between both treat and extend and the monthly was exactly the same. So both are drying in a similar manner. And another thing, proportion of patients with fluid-free macula, around 61% for both. So why give a monthly regimen when treat and extend can decrease the number of injections, maintain the same amount of dryness, give you near about the same vision, and decrease in the OCT thickness, which is very, very comparable to the monthly regimen. Another very neatly designed Canadian trial, the CAN-TREAT study, which again compared treat and extend and monthly. The only thing which was different in this was that there were 3 monthly injections in the loading dose. And if disease activity was detected, the interval was not reduced by 4. If it was around 12 weeks interval, it was reduced by 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks, which was done in the other treat and extend regimens. The extension was again capped to the last stable interval after 2 relapses. So if you have 2 relapses at 6 weeks, 6 weeks will be capped. It will not increase to 8 weeks subsequently. Again, 12 weeks was the maximal intervention which was there. So CAN-TREAT also demonstrated, if you see very interestingly at 2 years, that there was a great difference in the number of injections. You know, in the monthly group, there were 24 injections and around 18 injections in the treat and extend group. So that is 6 injections, a great difference in a cost to the patient as well. And if you see the increase in visual acuity, very, very comparable, half a letter difference, between the two, thus nailing the point that treat and extend is a great regimen. Another study, this was a more later study, the rival study, which compared ranibizumab 0.5 milligram or Lucentis and Eylea, aflibercept 2 milligram. It was because they both dry the macula considerably. The rival study wanted to study if there is a difference in development of macular atrophy, because that is one reason of vision loss in patients which are treated chronically with ARMD. So they were follow-up was for 2 years, and they, as a secondary endpoint, they also studied the number of injections and best corrected visual acuity, which was gained by this trial. Very interestingly, at 1 year and at year 2, the injections were nearly, the number of injections were nearly the same, and visual acuity, the development of the macular atrophy was slightly higher in ranibizumab compared to aflibercept, although this was not statistically significant. And if you see, the vision was better in ranibizumab compared to aflibercept, although slightly, again, this was not statistically significant, but 1 line difference. Another very interesting study which I could found was the fluid study, which wanted to test the hypothesis. As we see in some of our patients, they never really become dry. They have some amount of SRF. So this study really wanted to study that if we just take a random cutoff, less than 200 micron SRF, which is left, and the patient is still taken into treat and extend, that is the relaxed group, the normal way you do treat and extend. And if you do an intensive group where you keep treating before the macula becomes dry, is there a difference in visual acuity at 2 years? That is what they wanted to study. And if you see the relaxed and the intensive groups at 1 year and at 2 years, very little difference, maybe 1 line, the number of injections. Sorry, the number of injections, there was a difference of maybe a single injection, that was the difference. But if you come to visual acuity, there was hardly any difference in both the groups. So you can tolerate some amount of subretinal fluid if it does not increase over time when you are treating these patients. And if you feel that it is fixed and it is not decreasing the visual acuity, you can still follow them up at treat and extend. This is just an example showing you how they measured the persistent SRF. There are newer plans, the observe and extend, the observe and plan. These are newer regimens which have come in, like the 3 loading doses you give in this and you observe again, but there are again monthly visits. So at 3rd month it is dry, 4th month it is dry. If you find a recurrence at the 5th month, the month at which the recurrence has happened, that means if the recurrence has happened after 3 months, you will reduce 2 weeks from that and treat at that interval for another 2 treatments. That means you treat at month 5 and you treat at month 7.5, and then you again call the patient for a follow-up, and after 3 injections at the same interval, you again see them. So they theoretically claim that there is reduced number of visits, of the patient, and the visual acuity remains the same. But these regimens, I think, are a little more complicated. So treat and extend is a much more, I would say, a more easy regimen to remember and follow in your clinic, rather than remembering these regimens, although it is up to you to decide which suits you the best. Again, in this also, the treatment adjustment, you could not go above 8 weeks, in your follow-ups. So treat and extend versus observe and extend, quite comparable. Both of them, not much of a difference, had similar number of injections, and various treatment plans, observe and plan, treat and observe, wait and extend, where all have 3 loading doses and all increase follow-ups by around 2 weeks. But the maximum interval at which you extend, that means between 2 visits, is 8 weeks in treat and observe and wait and extend. However, in treat and extend, it can go up till 12 weeks maximum. There is wealth of evidence supporting the efficacy of treat and evidence as the trials which we have all discussed. So we all know that. Now coming to a few interesting case scenarios, which I found were particularly challenging. So this was around a 45-year-old male presented in 2012. And bear with me, these are slightly longer examples as I have follow-up of 7-8 years. He complained of sudden loss of vision in the left eye. It was finger counting close to face. Right eye was 6/6. For a few days, I could see a lot of hemorrhage and a pigment detachment here, and looked like IPCV. To me, I wanted to do ICG, but didn't have ICG in 2012. So we did a OCT, normal for the right eye. You can see an active choroidal neovascular membrane with subretinal fluid. In the left eye, was advised injection Avastin and or Lucentis, was given all the options, went elsewhere, got 3 injections, came back, was extremely dissatisfied. Vision was the same in the left eye. The right eye was absolutely normal. At this point of time, looking at this eye and looking at this vision, even after 3 injections of Avastin, I advised not to do anything else. I think, this had scarred down. So he was on my follow-up, and he comes a year later where he says he has decreased vision in the right eye now. So we see a decrease in best correct visual acuity 6/9. Left eye is near about scarred, and we see a small neovascular membrane, which is increasing, leaking in the late stages, possibly a polyp, could be a polyp. We do a optical coherence tomography, and we see a fibrovascular PED with SRF. We give him all the options. Because of the cost factors, he decides for Avastin intravitreal injection. After the first injection, there's a very good response. Patient feels much better than, of course, there's an improvement in visual acuity, but patient feels much better. So we give him 2 more injections, 3 injections of Avastin. We see that the visual acuity, patient's feeling better, but there is subretinal fluid. You can see that there is SRF here, which is not going even after 3 injections. So we, at this point of time, and usually after 3 injections, I repeat angiography. So we repeated the angiography. You can see a more, scarred looking lesion now, but now it has 2 pinpoints, probably could be polyps again in this case and leaking. So he was advised PDT, thinking that it was IPCV, and we advised PDT, but the patient refused. He had read something about PDT leads to vision loss, this thing. He had even discussed it with some retina specialist. So he absolutely refused PDT, said, no, nothing doing. I want to carry on with injections. But we definitely convinced him that you should switch to Lucentis. So we switched to Lucentis, and you can see that after 2 injections of Lucentis, the fluid which was persistent has gone. The visual acuity has improved to 6.6. So from vision, from a fluid, central foveal thickness of 450, he goes down to 370, and he's quite happy with the treatment. However, the fluid recurs, 1 month after I stop the treatment, and the visual acuity falls. So we already know what the disease is. So we tell him that he needs more injections and a regular follow-up. So he gets 1 more injection, which does reduce from 476. It reduces the foveal thickness to 370, feels better. Continues, we leave it, thinking that, probably it will become better. We do not give an injection, but as we withhold, within a month, the fluid comes back. You can see again from 390, it goes to 476. You see the subretinal fluid here, the membrane, which is flattened out, but still active. So we give another Lucentis injection here, and the fluid persists even after that injection into the next year, 2015, and the foveal thickness is also increasing. So we continue with the Lucentis and tell him that this will take a long time to cure. So he feels that, probably the treatment is not right, and he's lost to follow up. And he comes back and shows me, after a very long time, nearly a year in between. And we do a repeat angiography. So the disease has become more aggressive now. You can see more aggressive looking active disease now. And visual acuity has fallen to around 624. But of course, not too much hemorrhage, because I think it was previously treated. He is not willing for Lucentis at follow-up. He says, I cannot afford Lucentis. So we have no choice. We start with Avastin. And we give Avastin 3 times, but you can see, depending on you can see this particular area, which tells you how much the disease is responding. It's not responding much. We given first, second, third Lucentis, and you can see the SRF is increasing. The membrane is becoming bigger, and foveal thickness is increasing. So we show him all this, and we counsel him to switch to either Eylea or aflibercept, or get a PDT done, or do a combination therapy, but he's completely unwilling for that. He says, maximum I can do is take an injection, Lucentis. So we have to follow what the patient feels, although we do advise him what is best for him, but then ultimately it is the thing which he decides. So he gets 3 injections of Lucentis monthly here, and you can see a good response from 568 micron, it comes to around 440. SRF has reduced considerably. Vision improves from 636 to 69 parts. So that is, I feel it's a very good improvement. Patient is happy. And he tells me that he will not be very irregular for follow-up. And in between, he's maintaining 6.9 vision now. And in between, although he does miss follow-ups, whatever we say, it doesn't work. So in between, the disease increases slightly. We give a Lucentis, it settles down and has been doing quite well. He's maintaining vision. He's one-eyed since he has already lost the other eye. So whenever he feels a decrease in vision, he comes. Of course, he does not stick to follow-ups, what we recommend. And he did not take the therapy, what we suggested, but still some patients, some diseases can behave in a way where they tolerate a little amount of SRF, and not all IPCVs bleed and lead to blindness. So that this is proof of that. Another very interesting case in which the right eye is already lost. Patient has very less vision when he comes to us. His finger counting, left eye is 6.6, multiple drusens, which you can see. I do not have the right eye OCT. The left eye OCT showed absolutely normal macula. And there is no improvement on vision, although we still, even at this visual acuity, because we felt that we could probably try Avastin. So we gave him 3 Avastins, didn't work. So it remained the same. The vision was same. So we left it like that. This was in 2016. He was a smoker, 60-year-old male. So he came back in 2017, a year later, and you can see the scarred choroidal neovascular membrane, large membrane here. And you see a hemorrhage, and you see some activity here. This area is blocked because of the hemorrhage. So you cannot see if there is anything active here too, but some activity here. So again, if you see the OCT, there is a fibrovascular PED and some amount of SRF, and some blockage of the layers here because of the hemorrhage and increased foveal thickness. We give him 3 injections of Avastin. Avastin in our country, because of the cost, and if you tell the patients the different especially in the smaller cities and patients who are not very well to do, they definitely, if they are not on some healthcare policy, they always pick up Avastin as the first option because that is cheaper, and it definitely is. So we give him 3 injection Avastin. We find a wonderful response, and visual acuity improves to 6.6 and continues so for the next. After 3 injections, when the patient comes back, we see still some activity here, although it has flattened out. There is no SRF, but you see some RP reduplication here, and which is confirmed by the increased activity on angiography, which I usually repeat at 3 months. And after a single injection, it disappears, and the patient is happy, and the disease remains stable for the next 9 months. We keep him on follow-up. We try to call patients weekly and subsequently 6 weekly if the disease remains stable, and sometimes even 8 weekly in our PRN regimen, which we follow. So because of reasons of traveling, and patients are not able to come monthly. So we see that it's a pretty flat OCT. However, after 9 months, he comes with a partial recurrence. He says vision is good, but I'm, the periphery of the visual field, he's seeing metamorphopsia. He says, I see things bent. So at this point of time, when we do a OCT, I did not repeat an angiography because I knew what the disease was. And we did a OCT, and we could see a fibrovascular PED here, and not much SRF, minimal SRF. But at this point of time, we gave him an injection Avastin. The SRF disappeared, but the PED remained. So we gave him 1 more injection. It flattened a bit, but a little bit still remained, for the next, this was given in September. So for October and November, it remains pretty stable. Again, the patient comes back after 5 months, total of 3 months after the last injection. And we are able to see a PED and irregularity of the RPE, SRF, metamorphopsia has increased, vision has dropped slightly to 6.9. At this point of time, since it's a PED which is still remaining, not responding very well to Avastin, I convince him to switch to Lucentis. So with Lucentis, after a single injection, it returns to 6/6. Everything disappears. Everybody is feeling good, and it's March, and the patient goes home, does not come for the next monthly follow-up, and he comes only after 2 months with a sudden drop in vision of 2 to 3 days. And we see more and more PEDs now, and SRF. Vision has dropped to 6/18. At this point, we give another Lucentis, and this becomes better to 6/6. So patient comes for the next follow-up, and we do not give him an injection, as I do not see any SRF or a PED. But again, after 1 more month, the patient again comes with metamorphopsia, drop in vision, to 6/12. So we give him a Lucentis injection. But at this point of time, I see that at the next month visit, which he missed. So after 2 months, again, he's coming, the PEDs are still persisting, and the SRF has still not gone. Not that magical response to Lucentis, what I saw in the first time. So, but we still, with Lucentis, we give him 1 more, and the PED goes down, as still responds favorably after a month. But he comes back again, when after a month, and again a very similar picture to what we saw when we saw him around 6 months back. Again, a lot of fibrovascular PEDs and subretinal fluid. So at this point of time, I told him that we need more drying, and since his other eye again is damaged, he's a one-eyed patient. So he understood that probably Eylea could be a better bet. And although it was more than double the cost, so he went for Eylea. At this point of time, we gave him a Lucentis, but didn't work. You can see 23/11 and 21/1. So not much difference here. very similar. So at this point of time, we give him Eylea, that matches with this. And you can see even with one injection, near flattening of the PEDs, no SRF, and gain in visual acuity around 6.9. We gave him another. This is the just before lockdown. So he'll be coming for follow-up now. And we just talked to him recently because we are talking to patients in lockdown who are on follow-up. He's doing pretty well. Metamorphopsia has also gone down. So in conclusion, treat and extend regimen, I think, is one of the best, and it is a plan based on individualized treatment intervals. Treat and respects the variable needs of patients and is a simple protocol. You don't need to remember too many complicated things. Rival has told us that, they are pretty similar. Ranibizumab and aflibercept. In clinical practice, treat and extend regimen allows treatment of neovascular AMD with optimal outcome, also under real life conditions. But one thing which you have to remember is neovascular AMD, continuing intravitreal therapy has to be there for several years. It's not 1 year or 2 years. It can be 5 years. It can be 8 years, as you've seen in my cases, which I've discussed. Also, tremendous variation between patients. So there is no one set protocol which you should follow. You have to go according to the patient. And take home messages: treat with the anti-VEGF agent of your choice. Keep the disease type in mind. IPCVs are particularly more aggressive. Combination therapy, as told to us by the Everest study, is really helpful. Cannot overemphasize importance of regular follow-ups, and investigations. You must do OCT, do a very good visual acuity, probably by the same optometrist who has done it before. Make your patients active decision makers in their treatment. Patient should know what he is suffering from, which drug you are giving, why are you giving that drug, why is the other drug better. And treat and extend, to me, after studying all these studies, seems the best form of treatment, and I would definitely like to switch. And is economically feasible, and treatment switch, like switching from Avastin to Lucentis, Lucentis to Eylea, back to Lucentis, back to Avastin, can work wonders in non-responders. With newer molecules, it will be a very, very exciting journey ahead, like the brolucizumab which has come. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.